Hello and welcome to the Cayuga Community College television studio for the third in a series of debates this month involving the candidates for Cayuga County Legislature, Auburn Mayor, and Auburn City Council. I'm Jeremy Boyer, editor of the Citizen newspaper and auburnpub.com, and I'll be your moderator for these forums. These debates, which are recorded and produced by students at the college, are broadcast in cooperation with Time Warner Cable, Verizon Fios, and Auburn Regional Access Media. They are also posted for viewing anytime at the auburnpub.com website. Today's program features the candidates in the race for Cayuga County Legislature District 8, an area that includes the southern Cayuga County towns of Venice, Genoa, and Locke. The candidates in that district this year include the incumbent and a challenger. The incumbent candidate this year, Hans-Peter Petcher, running on the Republican, Conservative, and Reform Party ballot lines, won this seat in the 2011 election, running on the conservative line against a Republican opponent at the time. This year, he faces a challenge from Joe DeForest, who is running on the Democratic and Working Family Southern Team ballot lines. The rules for this debate are pretty simple. Candidates are given 2 minutes each for an opening statement and a closing statement, and the initial answers to all their questions are also allowed to have 2 minutes. And if they want to rebut those answers to those questions, they each have a minute for that as well. Earlier in the day, we took a coin toss to determine the order in which the candidates will give their opening statements, and as a result, we'll start tonight's program with Mr. DeForest. Mr. DeForest, welcome, and you now have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss the issues and challenges facing Cayuga County and the concerns of the residents of Genoa, King Ferry, Locke, and Venice. I wish to thank Mr. Boyer, the citizen, the students and staff of Cayuga Community College, and Hans Petcher for making this discussion possible. As a lifelong resident of Venice, a place I have lived, worked, and raised a family, I know what is important to me and my neighbors. We want to protect our resources, our land, our water, and our people. We have a great past, but we want to promote sustainable growth and employment so that our children will have a future, a place where they can live, grow, work, and have children of their own. But as we do this, we want to be certain to protect our rural character, for this is what we all love about our community. We want to maintain and improve our infrastructure as a crucial means to achieve our goals. We need good roads, we need access to high-speed internet for all, and we need to understand that dwelling in the past will not guarantee our future. I look forward to the election and to taking my seat on the Cayuga County Legislature so that I can work to move forward as a community and a county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. And now, Mr. Petcher, you also have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Hi, I'm Hans Petcher. I'm the current legislator for District 10, consisting of the towns of Genoa, Locke, and Venice. And I believe my record as a legislator, as a supervisor for a good many years, as a participant in many community events and school issues, that I'm best suited to serve the residents of District 10 for another 4 years. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you both for coming here today. I should also note to everyone at home that the Cayuga County Legislature is a 15-person body. Currently, it's comprised of 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans, and 1 conservative, that conservative being Mr. Petcher. And because of the weighted voting system in the county legislature, however, the Republicans do have a voting advantage over the Democrats. The position pays $10,100 annually for the base pay of that job. There are some extra funds for people to take the seat of chairman and some committee chairs. So we'll now move on into the questions. We'll start with the first question. For Mr. Petcher, I'll let you answer this first. And it has to do with the county budget. I know you guys had a session last night to delve into that somewhat, and it is looking more and more like the consensus is you want to stay under, the legislature wants to stay under the 1.25% state tax cap. My question for you is, do you support that? In doing so, do you support taking more money away from fund balance to make that happen, or to make cuts in spending, further cuts in spending? And if so, where would you make those cuts?
Well, basically last night we achieved going under the tax cap so far. I believe we can continue on that in that direction, and hopefully we won't get it back into putting money back into the budget that we've taken out. We still have another session to go next Wednesday again, I believe, and hopefully we'll keep cutting rather than expanding the budget and burdening our taxpayers.
And Mr. DeForest, your thoughts on the budget process, tax caps, cuts?
Well, with a
Fund
$140
balance.
million budget looming before the legislature and our citizens, and a shortfall which may or may not be in place, it's the responsibility of the legislature to make every possible cut it can. After those cuts are made, will it require exceeding the tax cap to make up for the shortfall? I don't have the information to make an informed answer. I would certainly make a strong case, though, to preserve programs that are crucial to my district.
Okay, well, I would like to talk about at least a couple of the cuts that are on the table or being discussed that came up at last night's meeting. One was a cut to the Cayuga County Soil and Water Conservation District, which the county provides a significant amount of funding to each year, as well as some discussions of potential cuts to Cornell Cooperative Extension of Cayuga County. Can you, asking both of you this question, but when you're in the position of trying to balance a budget and keep the tax levy under the cap, what's your position on potential cuts to those two programs? Mr. DeForest, that's for you to answer first.
I would be against making cuts to those particular programs. District 8 relies hugely on the agriculture economy, and I think both of those programs are very important to not only helping the agricultural community, but the rest of the residents in the community. It's an information source. It is a trusted source that people can go to learn more about the problems that we face being part of an agricultural community.
And Mr. Petcher, your thoughts on funding for those, for cooperative extension and for the Soil and Water District?
Well, I voted for cutting both of the agencies because they're not agencies that are under control of the Cayuga County government. The Soil and Water is a district, which is a self-governing body. The only thing we do for it is give it money. And seeing as how Cayuga County is Soil and Water District is probably the highest funded Soil and Water District in New York State, it's time to cut them back. Unfortunately, we didn't do it enough last night. And as far as Cornell Cooperative Extension, it's an item that went out of being relevant 50 years ago. Well, maybe not 50, but at least 20 years ago, when the computers and internet became the source of information. It is so easy to look up things now. If your apple tree is dying, you have certain symptoms of it. You look in the computer, punch the numbers in, punch the words in, and you get an answer. And Cornell Cooperative is just plain antiquated, and it's no longer necessary.
Any other thoughts on that subject? Yes, Mr. DeForest?
I would say the Cornell Cooperative Extension is, again, I'll repeat, a trusted source for information. There is loads of information on the internet. A person has to be quite educated to disseminate what is of value on the internet. And I would also say concerning the internet, yes, it's a great tool, but the southern end of the county that we live in doesn't have adequate access to high-speed internet. So the extension is important.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask both of you about the broadband access in the southern Cayuga County. I'll start with a question for Mr. Petcher. I know a few years back you did oppose the county providing money to a broadband expansion project down there. I think it was about $90,000, $92,000. And also you were against some discounts on tower access that they were looking to get for that project. Can you tell me, I guess, in two parts, explain your reasoning behind those votes, and secondly, what's your position on the importance of getting expanded broadband service to your region?
Basically, there are private companies that are supplying the service. It isn't maybe as great as could be, but the service is certainly there. It could be satellites, it could be Verizon, other companies, probably half a dozen different companies that could supply internet service. It might not be the biggest and the best, but then again, most of us never had the best of anything, and I don't expect to have the best of anything. As far as funding it, I was opposed to putting public money into what should be private enterprise. That's been one of my hallmarks over the years, keeping a separation between private industry and private enterprise. I blew that one. Yep.
No, that's fine.
As far as the rental of the towers, we're getting like $1,200 a year for the use of 2 towers. Currently, for our 911 system, we are paying a company that we rent a tower from that amount every month. So, you know, it's just a giveaway of public money. If the company wants to use our towers, fine, let them pay the going price. That's all I'm asking, or all I ask.
And so just in short, do you believe the service is adequate currently for the region in southern Cayuga County as far as high-speed internet?
Is hard to define. I'm saying the service is there. You know, it's
Gotcha.
And even broadband project doesn't include certain areas down there. It does not give 100% coverage. Last I knew, maybe 90% at the very best coverage when everything is in place, which has taken, what, 5 years or something so far to get to where we are, which is not very far along.
Okay. And Mr. DeForest, your thoughts on broadband expansion in southern Cayuga County?
Well, first of all, I think if privatization was going to take care of the problem, ever since the start of the 21st century, we've known we've entered the computer age. And if privatization is going to take place, well, it's been 15 years, and they really haven't come very far in our end of the district. We suffer from an inadequate broadband and high-speed internet, and the U.S. government has cited figures that for low-income Americans, 1 in 2 have internet at home. High-speed connection isn't some upper-income frill, but in the 21st century is a necessary tool needed to find a job, to do homework, to stay in touch with people you know. It becomes an economic necessity for communicating, collaborating, and doing business on a global scale. Its unavailability at an affordable price is a deterrent to real estate sales, business opportunities, and working out of your own home. The legislature does need to promote and continue the development of high-speed internet for all.
Okay. We'll move on to another topic in the vein of job creation and economic development, which is something, you know, I've never heard a candidate be against creating jobs and economic development. So the way I like to phrase this question is Cayuga County is paying $350,000 in a line item in the budget for economic development services. That money goes to Cayuga Economic Development Agency, often called CEDA, to provide the support, the marketing, the services that they do to try to achieve that job creation goal. The question I'll start with Mr. DeForest, you can answer it first, is can you evaluate how well we are doing at economic development, and is this $350,000 money well spent?
Well, I would have to say in recent years, our end of the county, we're starting to see, well, obviously agriculture business is huge, continues to grow. We're beginning to see inroads into organic farming. Certainly vineyards, wineries, Microbreweries are starting to crop up and gaining momentum. But I do feel that we are behind in terms of creating manufacturing jobs. You can't attract new or expand existing business in a vacuum. You need to prime the pump, so to speak. And my understanding is that the CETA as an agency can open doors and potential interest in the right direction, point interest in the right direction. My understanding is that what CETA is currently providing, and I would support Mark Farrell's program to use gaming money to support CETA.
Okay, and Mr. Petcher, your thoughts on economic development at the county level?
Well, we're spending a lot of money, and I really haven't seen the results come back. There are reasons for that. One of the things that I believe is hampering economic development in Cayuga County and the state of New York is the state government, the rules and regulations that they pour upon any business. It's Mr. Cuomo's program of bringing industry to New York, spent some $80 million, I believe, and created some 80 jobs, which is ridiculous. We're not in that boat. We're funding to a moderate amount, it was $350,000. We've done it a couple of years. It does create an agency which does allow people to basically apply to one place and get the information that they need for starting their businesses and maintaining them. Another thing is that at the south end of the county, having some of the best agricultural land in the state of New York, we don't need industry. I went through it back years ago as town supervisor. We try to attract industry. The people that out of Ithaca, out of the colleges and so forth, are not interested in coming up in the rural part of the country. They preferred staying in Ithaca. What my strategy now is, or what I hope the strategy for the county is that we concentrate our efforts to attract business in the Auburn area, where the infrastructure is in place, rather than trying to create sewer systems and so forth that are not necessary in the rural parts of Cayuga County, my district in particular.
Okay, any other thoughts on that particular topic? All right, we'll move on. A question for Mr. Petcher and Mr. DeForest. You can certainly respond to his answer, but it's really specific to Mr. Petcher because you had a vote, a pretty key vote last year at the beginning of the year on who to support for the chairman, given the divide that's currently at the legislature. And you went ahead and did support Mr. Chapman at the time to continue as chairman. My question is, can you explain why he was your choice and talk also about how you feel he's done this year in that role?
Well, Mr. Chapman had been our chairman before, did an excellent job, and has continued to do an excellent job. He was a man best suited for the job. That's why I voted for him. And
this year, you think he's done what you would hoped he would do?
I think, again, he's done an excellent job. We're really going to miss him. I don't think we have anybody of his caliber coming up in the line.
All right. Any other thoughts on that, Mr. DeForest? Nope. Okay. Well, I'll get to a more open-ended question for both of you, and that is specific to your district, the towns of Genoa, Locke, and Venice. What are one or two issues? We did touch on broadband, of course, but what are some other issues that you're hearing from residents down there that you feel are unique to your district that you can help out in resolving as a member of the legislature? And I'll start with Mr. DeForest on that question.
Well, we've discussed the broadband end of things, which is, to me, extraordinarily important, but I think we can move on from that. Second to that, I would say, would be condition of county roads. My understanding, a number of years ago, the County Highway Department was on a more or less 5-year plan where they did a rotation in terms of how they tackled the county roads that need to be worked on in the county. And it seems like that, I could be wrong on this, but it seems like that plan has been abandoned in the last 4 or 5 years anyways, maybe longer than that. So I think it's really important for the legislature to come up with a long-term plan that deals equitably with repairs and roads in the future.
Okay, and Mr. Petcher, your thoughts on specific district issues?
Taxes is the one comment that I've heard repeatedly from constituents as I'm out campaigning. Tax cap was important to quite a few people. Keep it under the, stay under the tax cap is the advice that I received from my constituents. Roads have been a perennial problem. After this last winter, the roads have taken a terrible beating. The state roads are in much worse shape than some of the county roads. And for the future, for highway improvement, we're trying to get an extra million, or we'll have an extra $1 million in the budget just for all Cayuga County highway repairs, not just in our area, but all over. So hopefully we'll get caught up and keep the roads maintained after that, so we don't have to spend as much money on them as we will have to now as a makeup, the catch-up.
Yeah, you're referring to the $1 million that
That's
is in the county
budget.
pulled from the fund balance, I believe, to provide that funding for infrastructure, for roads.
Well, not necessarily it's coming from the funds, which are,
Yeah. So I was going to add, you do support the use of that money for roads?
Oh, absolutely. Our fund balance is not sacrosanct. It's there to use as we need it. It's basically leftover funds from the previous years always is what makes up the fund balance. And if we need to use it, we should do so and keep it within reasonable bounds. We have our own criteria for it. Some is between 10 and 15%. 15%, that's about what we have right now. If we go down to 12, fine, but we should not go much below 12 in the near future.
Gotcha. And Mr. DeForest, your thoughts on using $1 million out of fund balance for roads next year?
I think if it's within basically as Hans has said, if it's within the realm of the framework that the legislature has agreed on for an amount to work within, then yes, I'd be in favor.
A question for both of you, and we'll let Mr. Petcher answer first. Can you evaluate the relationship between county government and the towns in your district? Just how well they cooperate and communicate from county level down to towns and back and forth, and what, if anything, can be improved along those lines?
Well, going back to my days as town supervisor, I was always pleasantly surprised at the cooperation that our town, the town of Genoa, received from county government. If we needed anything, that machinery, equipment that we didn't have, the county would let us borrow it or rent it to us or make arrangements to use the equipment. So I feel over the years our relationship with the towns has been great. That's about it, I guess.
That about does it. Okay. And Mr. DeForest, from your perspective, the county relationship with the towns?
Well, I'd like to continue to see that evolve more, and that more consolidations of services and ideas, ways to make the jobs that need to be done more efficiently. One of the exciting things that's always in recent years that happens down in our part of the county, and perhaps happens all over the county, I'm not sure, but I see it firsthand where I live, is the town road superintendents collaborating and getting together and tackling projects on their roads, with the from grading to tarring to that whole aspect. You see the town crews working together, you see shared equipment, and it's just a proof that that kind of help can work.
Okay. You did mention consolidation, and I did have a question or two about that. And a few different proposals have been kind of working their way through the legislature, mostly with respect to consolidation with the city of Auburn. One is a shared motor pool project. There's also been discussion of shared Department of Public Works facilities, and lastly, potentially a new regional public safety building. My question for you, the first question dealing with consolidation is, do you support continuing to pursue those three projects? And you can possibly break down each one if you have a feeling about each one. Motor pool, DPW, public safety with the city of Auburn.
I think that it's imperative that we continue to look at ways that we can consolidate between city and county and towns. Legislature needs to create an environment that's conducive to trust between the county, city, and towns. And the lead should be taken by the county administrator and the city manager and town supervisors, listening to each other, discussing duplication of services and how services and tasks can be efficiently delivered or completed. Seems to me that's the first step in doing good business and finding ways to make cost-effective decisions.
Okay, and Mr. Petcher, your thoughts on consolidation, those three areas in particular?
Well, there's three areas in particular, starting with the motor pool. We're working on that. It's taking forever to get it done, but we are working on it. We'll see whether there's a saving for the county and the city when we get done. We hope there is. As far as highway garage, as such, I think we'd have to first experiment and see how we go with a motor pool before we take any bigger steps. And as far as the public safety building, I don't see that we need the space, so we shouldn't be going there. Now, as far as consolidation in general, back years ago there was even some suggestions that we join county, city, and eliminate some of the governments and all this and that for supposedly greater efficiency. I did just a run through of the numbers just to see where it would leave us out in the county. And if all of a sudden we're sharing the tax burden equally, based not on our specific needs, but just sharing it equally across the board, our taxes down in the south end of the county would double and triple to pick up the burden that Auburn does for more increased services. So any steps towards consolidation have to be taken extremely carefully and slowly.
Understood. Any thoughts on that, Mr. DeForest? Any further thoughts on that one?
Well, I would agree with that in theory, and I guess the only thing that I would add is oftentimes there's a fear of that word consolidation, and it tends to be born out of the idea that someone's power is going to be diminished or somebody's going to lose a piece of the pie. Those things need to be weighed, and as Hans says, it has to be weighed and measured, and what is the value in doing any aspect of it. But we do continually need to take a look at and revisit sharing services and equipment and so forth any place we can to make cost-cutting measures.
One area that has come up from time to time, I think there was even a study at the county level a few years back, is every town has their own assessor that they pay money to do their assessments. One of our neighbors to the south, Tompkins County, I believe, has actually a county-wide assessment program. Is that something that you think the county ought to try to pursue with the towns to create a universal or a county-wide assessment program as opposed to individual assessors in each town? We'll start with Mr. Petcher on answering that one.
I've opposed it in the past as town supervisor. I felt that we were best served by having our own assessor. Then we had some problems, I should say, and I realized it was better to have somebody from outside the community do the assessing rather than have locals who are influenced by families, ties, their own business interests, etc., etc. So at the present time, I haven't thought about it in a long time, but I would be open to going a different way as long as it, the costs of it were spread equally among the towns and counties, or the towns and the county.
Okay, and Mr. DeForest on unifying assessments.
I would have to agree that my feeling always was that I felt that perhaps locally we could do that on a town per basis and do a better job of that until I became a property owner. And I would have to say that Hans hit the nail on the head. It is very difficult sometimes for people who have been appointed to a position in the community, from the community, not to show partiality to friends, neighbors, business concerns. I do hear a lot of complaints about the idea of the universal sort of approach to assessments, but I think it's the best thing we've got at the moment, and that we need to stick with it until a better solution presents itself.
Okay, we're going to move on to water quality. I don't believe the communities that you are in are in District 8 are right on the lake, but nevertheless, a big part of water quality discussion here for Owasco Lake has been the impact that large farms are having on the watershed. I've heard some suggestions, even just meeting with candidates here this season, that we need to have stricter environmental regulations and stiffer fines for the farms that do violate regulations that are out there. Do you support an increase or taking those kinds of measures in order to better protect Owasco Lake? We'll start with Mr. DeForest on that.
Water contributes to every person's health, to farm economies, to recreation, tourism, and entrepreneurship. And it's perhaps the greatest common denominator in sustaining an enhanced quality of life. County legislature should continue to provide forums for an exchange of ideas and information to all shareholders, the shareholders being all the citizens of the county, with programs like Cayuga County Manure Management Working Group, the Cornell Cooperative Extension, and the Cayuga County Soil and Water District. And informed citizenry is more understanding of different points of view and able to look at the whole picture to work collectively and to approach and solve problems of this magnitude. As to DEC and tougher enforcements and penalties, I understand it's a fine line that needs to be walked. You don't want to push an industry so important to our overall economic welfare to failure, but you want enforcements and penalties that have enough bite to keep that industry in line. This enforcement needs to remain in state hands because the county can't begin to economically sustain the costs of inspecting and enforcing infractions.
Okay, and Mr. Petcher, your thoughts on stricter environmental regulations, tougher penalties on farming violators?
Basically, most of the problem we're talking about one huge event a couple of years ago, large manure washing into the lake that put the spotlight on the problem. The problem is actually ongoing, has been from day one, is when our planet was formed. It's called erosion. Wind, water, rain coming down, leaches into the ground, and if it comes enough quantities, it moves ground. And that ground follows gravity. It goes to the lowest point, ends up in the lakes. It ends up polluting the lakes. The best thing we can do is basically use good agricultural practices, strip cropping, sod waterways, etc., etc., that limit the flow into the lake. Also, currently the county is involved in a project to limit the silt that is being brought in through the inlet, the Owasco Inlet, building retaining ponds and so forth that would slow down the flow of nutrients into the lake. Also, something that homeowners could do is maybe not use fertilizer on their lawns. You know, a green lawn isn't that important. You know, just actually I like mine brown because I don't have to mow it as often. But those things should be done. To pass another law for enforcement on the local level is ridiculous. Laws don't prevent anything. The only thing they do is they have a punitive quality to them after the fact. So as far as increased fines, yep, as a possibility of it, but instead it should be, money should be put towards perhaps making sure that the farms with manure containment systems have adequate capacity for an extra flow.
Understood. Okay. Asking most of the candidates at these forums also about at the north end of the lake, Emerson Park, and obviously it's the county's. Some may say it's the county's crown jewel of a park, although maybe folks in Sterling would argue with that. But anyway, some suggestions came out last year through an updated comprehensive plan of improvements that could be made. My question for both of you is, what specific upgrades, improvements would you like to see happen at the park, and how would the county pay for them, of course? We'll start on that question with Mr. Petcher.
Well, I believe the plan is fairly workable, and I think our best step is to follow the recommendation of the people, the committees that have worked on it and implement it. As far as talk about a hotel, big hotel and so forth, I'm not so sure that I'm in favor of that. I think that the park was meant by the Emersons more or less to be a people's park rather than attracting a lot of tourists, for instance, to the lake. There's also development, maybe a smaller complex that's being built on private property, and I would be satisfied with that as far as the park.
Okay. Mr. DeForest on Emerson Park.
Well, I do believe Emerson Park is one of the jewels of our county. I believe that it's a calling card for tourism. As a past managing director of the Merry-Go-Round Playhouse, I have many fond memories of the park and many opportunities to have seen the park staff in action and assisting and working together to deliver a desirable experience to the park users. The park administrations and employees should be applauded. I truly believe that the implementation of the master plan that sought the insights of the citizenry of the county was an excellent step forward. Work towards more user-friendly playground facilities, the canoe accessibility and the implementation of bike trails are important steps forward in making the park all that it can be, and future additions need to have a balanced approach that demonstrates they are affordable and self-sustainable additions. And of course, as Hans basically said, any further development needs to be mindful of the spirit of the original gifting of the park by the Emerson family to the county.
Okay. Well, moving on to another area, the county administrator, Suzanne Sinclair, has been in the job about 2 years now, and she's put out a few budgets and worked with the legislature in formulating policy for the county. So I'm going to ask you both to evaluate the job she's doing. And in addition, what are your thoughts on how well the legislature is working with the administrator in terms of helping facilitate communication within county government? We'll start with Mr. DeForest on that question. And I realize you're not in the building every day, but just from your sense of observing things, what do you think of the performance so far of Ms. Sinclair?
Well, I'd have to say at this time, I have no working interaction with Suzanne Sinclair, so it's hard to express an informed opinion. What I would say is, as a result of my administrative background at Wells College and Merry-Go-Round Playhouse, is if there are naysayers or detractors about the job she has done, I'd have to ask, have the parameters of the county administrator job been clearly defined? As the current legislature's members assisting or hindering the functionality of the position? I haven't been there firsthand. I really can't answer that question.
Understood. And Mr. Petcher, you are there, so you can
Yes, I am.
have a little more insight perhaps into that question. So what are your thoughts?
Well, if I had a grader, I'd give her B, so
Okay.
not an F or anything like that. I'm not entirely in favor of the administrator concept. Back years ago, I campaigned for a strange thing, a president for Cayuga County. There's actually an alternative form of government that is allowed under the state constitution, which would, in effect, have an elected president, countywide elected president for the county. Now, I'm not saying we need to pursue that at this time, but I've always preferred having an elected official at the head of a government rather than an appointed one. So.
Understood. And how, given what you just said, I mean, do you feel like with the administrator form of government that we have, how well defined is that job right now? Does it need to be further refined in terms of what its powers are and how that person communicates with both the legislature as well as with employees?
I think it's fairly well outlined. I think it's well enough done, period.
Gotcha. One final quick question for you guys both, and that is the weighted voting system. You're in a district that actually has, I think, quite a few weighted votes, and some people up in Auburn have a lot less. So there's been some debate whether that needs to be reevaluated, the district lines in the county. Do you support changing the weighted voting system, and if so, how would you go? If so, why or why not? And then if so, how would you go about getting that done? So we'll start that question with Mr. Petcher.
I believe it's working adequately. There is a discrepancy. Some is like most of the city legislators are in their 40s, 45, 48, some is around there. Most of I think we're 62 or 61, something like that, our district. I think we go as high as 78 for Wasco Senate. And I think it's a workable system to rearrange. One of the, at the last time the districts were changed, it was done with a concept that we wanted to keep towns whole rather than splitting up towns, making everything a lot easier. And if we go into changing things again, we're going to be crossing town lines again and just creating a mess that nobody knows where they belong. So it's working adequately.
Okay, and Mr. DeForest, your thoughts on that one?
Well, do I think that it is fair to the districts? No. Should we redistrict to get one person, one vote? Maybe, but has anyone come up with a fair and equitable way to achieve that? Do you draw district lines through towns, or if some of the districts are combined, does the representative have the time to adequately attend their needs? So what I'll say is redistricting should periodically be reviewed, but changing serves no purpose if the resolution doesn't achieve a fair and equitable solution.
Okay, well, that wraps up all my questions for you gentlemen, and I appreciate you coming in to answer them, and I'm going to let you wrap things up. And as we said at the beginning of the program, we'll go in reverse order for closing statements. So Mr. Petcher, you can give your closing statement. You have up to 2 minutes for that.
Well, basically I believe my experience in the various areas of government, all the way from town government, fire departments, county, working on school committees, working within the community organizations such as the Genoa Historical Association qualifies me for the office, and I believe I'm the best man for it. Sorry, Joe.
All right, well, thank you for that. And Mr. DeForest, you also now have up to 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay. It's important to me to see my district and the county moving forward, working as efficiently and creatively as possible to promote opportunities for sustainable growth and employment, to maintain and improve infrastructure, to improve roads, to make high-speed internet a priority for all, and secure a future that'll keep our youth and attract new families, business, tourism, entrepreneurship, and agriculture to our community, and at the same time, respect and preserve our rural way of life. I want to thank you, Jeremy, the citizen, Cayuga Community College, Hans, for providing this opportunity, and to the voters for taking the time to listen to my thoughts on important issues. Speaking to the residents in Genoa, King Ferry, Lock, and Venice, I just want to say I appreciate your consideration and your vote on November 3rd. When elected, I'll look to you for your ideas and insights. I will be accessible, I will listen, and I will work hard for you. Thank you.
All right, well, I'd like to thank both of these candidates for taking the time out of their busy campaign schedules to discuss these issues today. And thanks for stepping up to the plate to run for elected office, because that's certainly something that takes a lot of energy and courage to do. And thanks for watching with us at home. These debates are replayed on Time Warner and Verizon, and you can get the information on those replay times in the Citizen. And if you're watching this debate Thursday night on Time Warner Cable, I can tell you that the debate that was held here on Tuesday for County Legislature District 10, a City of Auburn race between Joseph Bennett and Jennifer Young, will be coming up next. And as I noted earlier, we also have all of the debates posted to the auburnpub.com website for viewing anytime. We have 4 more forums coming up between now and Election Day. The candidates for District 6 in Owasco and Senate, those are Eileen McNabb-Coleman and Joseph Runkle, will be here on Tuesday, October 20th. And the forum for another Auburn legislature race, District 14, between Mike Didio and Dominic Basile, will be held on October 22nd. The final week will feature Auburn races. On October 27th will be the Auburn mayoral debate between Mike Quill and Tim Lattimore, followed October 29th with the Auburn City Council candidates, Jimmy Giannattino, Dia Carbajal, Pete Ruzicka, and John Camardo. And that will lead us to Election Day on Tuesday, November 3rd. Thanks again for your interest in this year's campaign season, and please make sure you take the time to vote in the general election on November 3rd. Have a great night.